Last week, we started this important series about understanding Israel. This topic is a much needed one as we prepare for Yah's kingdom. There are many lies and falsehoods that have surrounded this topic, and as it was explained in the first video, we cannot know the God of the Hebrews without knowing and understanding the Hebrews. This nation or group of people who Yah chose to make his covenant with and introduced himself to the world through, we cannot overlook their history and bypass them, and then on the flip side, apply what we want to feel about Yah without them. Israel is an important topic that cannot be ignored, so this ministry will not allow it to be ignored. Especially being that in the end times, there are so many falsehoods that are attached with it. It is important that followers of Yah are introduced to the God of ancient Israel through understanding Israel. We do this so we understand Yah's will, his desire, what he loves, and what he hates. People today live in such lawlessness. Unfortunately, even those who say they love the God of Israel through belief in his son whom he sent, Yahusha, whom in English is referred to as Jesus. But there is no way we can live in this lawlessness if we actually read his word and understood how Yah dealt with his chosen people when they tried to live in lawlessness. When we understand him through how he dealt with Israel, we can learn and better understand how to serve him. He said the same thing many times to Israel, and if we want to understand Yah and serve him, we must understand it too. So in this part of the series, this is what we will discuss: how Yah desires those who follow him to serve him. This must be a foundation of our knowledge of him, so we need to discuss it. Let's begin. Therefore, you shall keep my commandments and perform them. I am Yahuah. Leviticus chapter 22, verse 31. You shall diligently keep the commandments of Yahuah your Elohim, his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of Yahuah, that it may be well with you, and that you may go in and possess the good land of which Yahuah swore to your fathers. That's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 17 and 18. Therefore, you shall keep the commandments of Yahuah your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him. That's Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 6. You shall walk after Yahuah your Elohim and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 4. Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahuah your Elohim, to observe carefully all his commandments which I command you today, that Yahuah your Elohim will... Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 1. If you read the Old Testament, this is how he spoke with Israel and communicated with them. This is what he desired for them. He desired obedience. As he spoke with each generation, he carefully spoke to them and gave them this message. When he chastised them and rejected them, it was for not heeding this message. This is important to understand when understanding Israel. When we look at our own ways and cultures, we can often mistakenly apply an understanding of Yah that does not actually match to him because we don't understand him. Back in ancient Israel, all those who understood and followed Messiah understood the fundamental message of obeying Yah. Like Yahusha said in John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments. Or in 1 John chapter 3, verse 24, it says, now he who keeps his commandments abides in him, and he in him. And by this we know that he abides in us, by the Spirit whom he has given us. We have to follow Yah. The basis and foundation of what this part of the series will focus on is what Israel was responsible to do. And this was about obeying and following Yah's commands. This was the foundation of their relationship with him. So if you go to the New Testament and don't understand Israel's history with this and how Yah guided them to obey his commands, you can see or understand a different gospel. Yah did not harp on obedience of his commands to Israel and severely chastise them when they were disobedient to him, to later on speak to the whole world and provide a Messiah just to tell them, okay, all you need to do is believe, and he does not require obedience to his commands. You are speaking of two different gods if this is how you look at him. It is perhaps that you probably don't understand, or you are overgeneralizing the law of Moses when you believe that we are not under the law. We cannot just live in lawlessness. He said those that live like that will be rejected because they do not know him. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Is Matthew chapter 7, verse 23. So we must place this at the forefront of our understanding of him and how we will interact with him. As we come to serve him, we must know what he loves and what he hates, what he really responds negatively to, and what brings him delight, honor, and praise. And we will only know this through reading his word, his complete word. As you read through the Old Testament, you see the many different times that Yah spoke to Israel. You see the times when he was pleased with them and blessed them, and the times when he was angry with them and cursed them. These were his people that he chose unto himself. As I just explained, the very big understanding of Israel goes into the agreement Yah made with Israel. A foundation of understanding Israel should be found in Deuteronomy chapter 28. In this chapter, he says to Israel, Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahuah your Elohim, to observe carefully all his commandments, which I command you today, that Yahuah your Elohim will set you high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, because you obey the voice of Yahuah your Elohim. That's Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 and 2. And then the curses. But it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of Yahuah your Elohim, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. That's Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 15. This chapter of Deuteronomy 28 should be a fundamental part of understanding when learning and knowing Israel, because it speaks to so many things. Now, I have made a video about this specific subject, and I've illustrated this chapter in particular in this actual video. You should watch it after this video is done, because it is such an important subject to understand. You cannot understand Israel if you have not placed this agreement they made with Yah in your understanding. It's also important because you understand a lot about Yah and how he actually is. So many have painted him in ways that are not accurate. He does care about how we are, how we live, and how we worship him. It's often people that have not read about him in the Old Testament and how he dealt with Israel that don't really understand him. So this is an important chapter of the Bible to really grasp. Actually, the whole book of Deuteronomy really is. Israel was meant to be an example of Yah to the whole world, especially if they would have been obedient and walked in his ways. But nevertheless, everything that they did and they went through is a testimony to us. We learn of their successes and their failures. We understand Yah through their eyes because they are the only nation in the world to deal with him and have a personal covenant with him. Now, that didn't mean that people from other nations were not able to come to Yah and worship him. No, that's not true. They were called Gentiles or strangers during that time. It's important that you grasp the importance of the designation of stranger, that these people of other nations were called by Israel. Understand, they are strangers because they did not know Yah. But the blessing is, if they claimed to Israel and served Israel, they would then be grafted into Yah through Israel, no longer a stranger. The foreigner or stranger was not able to dwell in Israel and serve Yah any way they chose, just because they didn't have a direct covenant with him. Through the example of Israel, they were taught how to serve Yah, and from that, they were no longer a stranger. And if a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am Yahuah your Elohim. That's Leviticus chapter 19, verses 33 and 34. He said, You shall have the same law for the stranger and for one from your own country. For I am Yahuah your Elohim. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 22. Israel was always supposed to show their ways to the rest of the world and also not be swayed by the ways of the rest of the world, because Israel was led by Yahuah. Israel's purpose was that they were always supposed to be Yah's people and be the ones who declared Yah's way and his great name to the rest of the people of the earth. As King Solomon said as they were dedicating the first temple, moreover, concerning a foreigner who is not of your people Israel, but has come from a far country for your name's sake, for they will hear of your great name and your strong hand and your outstretched arm. When he comes and prays towards this temple, hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all which the foreigner calls to you, that all peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this temple which I have built is called by your name. 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 41 through 43. And this was the purpose of Israel. And at the height of Israel, when Solomon was king and was dedicating the first temple, he declared to Israel, May Yahuah, our Elohim, be with us, as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us nor forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to himself, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, which he commanded our fathers. And may these words of mine, with which I have made supplication before Yahuah, be near Yahuah our Elohim day and night, that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, as each day may require, that all the peoples of the earth may know that Yahuah is Elohim, there is no other. Let your heart therefore be loyal to Yahuah your Elohim, to walk in his statutes and keep his commandments as at this day. It's 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 57 through 61. And this is what Israel was supposed to do. And if they did this, we would know his ways and understand what it looked like to follow Yah through their physical example, and not just by having to read about them. They were to be our examples and priests of the world. But we now need to understand the unfortunate truth, which is that Israel did not follow Yah. They followed after other gods and became separate from Yah. After Solomon, Israel was divided, and the northern 10 tribes declared their own king, and Judah and Benjamin separated and declared their own king. So Israel was divided. There was the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. The northern tribes went into straight wickedness, and they were conquered first by the Assyrians, and they never returned as a whole back to their land. Judah was conquered after Israel, and they were carried off by Babylon. They eventually did come back to the land, and they rebuilt the temple. This was the second temple, Herod's temple. When they returned back to their land, they were now referred to as Jews, which stems from Judah. And they came back in Israel, not as strong as they originally were when they were following Yah. This was to fulfill the prophecy of the Messiah. You see, they were prophesied of a Redeemer from the line of King David, and many of them expected him to be like King David and unite the kingdom and bring back peace in their land, removing the hand of the Romans that were now in control of their land of Judea. It's important to really understand Judah at that time. While Judah was being conquered and being carried off to Babylon, Greece was also gaining power in the world. In the 4th century BC, Alexander the Great steps onto the scene. He was a conqueror. Around 334 BC, he started his conquest of the world empire at the time, which was Persia. If you remember, Daniel prophesied about this to Nebuchadnezzar. Alexander the Great, who was known as the King of Macedonia in northern Greece, set out on one of the most extensive military expeditions in history at that time. His armies swept eastward, conquering the Persian Empire controlled by King Darius III. His conquests included Anatolia, which is part of Turkey, Syria, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Phoenicia, which is also part of Turkey, Libya, Lebanon, and other territories. He extended the boundaries of his empire as far as Punjab, India. As part of this military campaign, he captured Jerusalem in 332 BC. There is so much to learn personally about Alexander's conquest, but what is most important is his method of conquest, which is still used today by America in the spread of what they call democracy. Alexander's conquest introduced Greek culture into the Eastern Mediterranean world. His rule introduced Hellenism. Hellenism is the study or imitation of ancient Greek culture. And this was why Alexander's rule was so remarkable. Because though he conquered these civilizations, he left the country to the people. He just imparted his Greek culture with them. Cities such as Alexandria the city he built in Egypt, became influential centers of Greek learning. This also crossed into Judah, also now referred to as Judea. The Greek language replaced Hebrew and Aramaic as the principal language for trade, education, and international relations. This does not mean that it replaced all of Hebrew. It just replaced the language used by those who were controlling Judea. It was only those that were educated and that dealt with the Greeks. The cities of Decapolis, which is east of Galilee and Samaria, which is mentioned in Matthew chapter 4, were centers of Hellenistic culture. Okay, so Alexander died in 323 BC, and his empire was divided among several of his generals. One of these governors, named Seleucus, governed Asia Minor, modern Turkey, and Syria. Another named Ptolemy governed Egypt. They established the Seleucid and Ptolemaic dynasties. This was not a peaceful period for Greece. In Judah, life was changing. They were now under Greek captivity, and they were now being forced to adapt to Greek culture. Understand that Hebrews' life revolved around two centers, the temple and the Torah. The temple was, of course, located in Jerusalem, and it remained the one place where sacrifices could be offered. There were, however, increasing numbers of local gatherings or synagogues scattered where Jews could read scripture and pray together. These synagogues helped Jews everywhere maintain a sense of community and tradition. As long as they continued with the Torah, they would continue to please Yahuah. But the Greek strategy was all about assimilating their culture amongst the world. Again, you don't need to rule a country using your power to control them. You just export your traditions and values over to them, and this will change them over the generations. This is easily seen through the history of America and England, through the conquest of many other nations through history. So over time, Greece's Hellenistic religious and political culture, along with their language, had significant influence among the aristocratic Jews, basically the uppity high society Jews. The leading priestly families were largely Hellenized. They were given to Greek culture, and they were involved in heavy financial schemes that fueled rivalries over the priest office in Jerusalem. These high society Jews introduced new culture like public nudity and athletic games, attendance in Greek theaters, cultic clubs, being uncircumcised, and a host of other practices that were offensive to the Hebrews. The goal was to remove the foundation of life the Hebrews had. There was a rift between the conservative Jews and the liberal changing Jews. The Hebrews had a different culture than every other nation because they served the one true God. So at this point, this is where we see Antiochus IV take things to a new level. In 167 BC, he came in and desecrated the temple and established it as a cult of Zeus. The Torah, the law of the Jews, was removed, and their religious practices, including Sabbath observance, were outlawed. He introduced the idolatrous worship of Zeus into the temple itself and instituted the eating of pork as a test of one's loyalty to him. Antiochus's policies provoked a military response from some Jews. The principal leader of the revolt was a man named Judah, nicknamed Maccabeus, or the Hammer. Accounts of the conflict, known as the Maccabean Revolt, is told in the Book of Maccabees, which are a part of the Apocrypha. The Hellenized Jewish aristocracy sided with Antiochus, and that meant that the revolt against Antiochus was also a war of Jews against Jews. The fighting continued until 164 BC. Judah and his troops liberated the Jerusalem temple from the Syrians and began the process of cleansing it from defilement. Judah reached an agreement with the Syrians that officially returned the temple to control of the Jews. Antiochus V, having succeeded his father, was apparently willing to reach a compromise and to rescind his father's decrees. This is where the festival of Hanukkah was founded by, though it has nothing to do with the command from Yahuah himself. The Maccabees gained complete control of the region and established an independent kingdom of the Jews that would continue until 63 BC. And during this time, there were a number of Jews that adopted a number of different Hellenistic religious beliefs and practices. So let's stop right there real quick. What I want you to understand, because it's crucial in understanding the Jews. As I started this part of this series, I explained the foundation of what Israel followed and believed. The Jews recognized themselves as the only ones who worshiped the true Creator, and they did not accept assimilating with the colonizers like the Greeks and the Romans. Though the world was being controlled by Greece, the Jews who considered themselves to be in the highest standing with the Creator did not follow their ways. This again was why they had this Maccabean revolt. They knew that they were to follow Yah and be under Him, and Yah only spoke to them. So there was no need to assimilate through the ways of the conquered world. Those in high authority like the scribes and Pharisees, these educated ones, they were the ones who compromised and who assimilated, because they were the ones that were looked at as having control, being the religious authority and the bridge between the Greek and the Roman rulers and the Jews living in Judea. But as we move on and get to discussing Messiah, you must understand that his followers and his disciples were not this educated class. They were not of the scribes and the Pharisees. They were common men, fishermen like Peter. They did not compromise or hold on to Hellenization. They were attaching themselves to Yah and trying to follow Yah. So it's important to not attach the Hellenization that Greece spread to the Jews. If they were attached to Greece, they would not have been attached to Yah. This is why Messiah had such a problem with the scribes and the Pharisees. If you remember, many times he called them hypocrites. The people of Yah believed that their way and culture was the absolute way because they were in communion with the one true God, not the pagan gods that their forefathers were rejected and chastised for following. For those that wished to stay under Yah, they held to their culture, very much how people in America are today, being that America's the world empire. They all agree and understand that English is their language, and they say things like, "You're in America, so speak English." The Jews were in their land, so they spoke their own language. They did not attach to what the world was moving to, especially being that they knew if they followed Yah, they would be the leaders of the world. This is why it's important to understand their mindset, their law, and their culture. So anyways, during the times of the Maccabean revolt and before, Greece was losing their power. Romans had been conquering lots of land and territories, establishing themselves as a formidable power in the Mediterranean, and they wanted more. So they turned eastward. In 197 BC, Rome conquered Macedonia, and by 146 BC, Greece was conquered by the Romans. In 63 BC, Rome took control of Judah and Jerusalem, but they left the land in local control. This was during the times of Julius Caesar, so there was a lot of politics going on in Rome. In 38 BC, Herod the Great, the son of Antipater, who was an Edomite, is now on the scene. His ancestors converted to Judaism, and he was raised a Jew, but he was not one by blood. Herod transformed the country of Judea. He built the port of Caesarea on the coast and a temple to Augustus in Samaria. He remodeled the Jerusalem temple and next to it built the Antonia fortress, a Roman military installation. During his time, he was labeled King of the Jews, and this is the beginning of the history that would change the world. Judah never returned to the way it was before they were captured and taken into Babylon. Things had changed for them. There were no real leaders or kings in charge, and the leaders that were in charge were corrupt and served themselves. There were Hebrews that continued in the law and a lot of others that tried to assimilate with the world empires. There was just a mixture of them. And the Jews of Judea began to wait on the Redeemer that was prophesied to them, and they waited for our Messiah to come to them. With all this history, you could really understand why they believed that this coming Redeemer was going to be like King David, who would bring them peace to their land and brought back greatness to their kingdom. But they could not see the fullness of Yah's plan until he came, and only those with understanding of Yah's will were able to receive the Messiah that was sent to them. And it is at this point where we will stop, because understanding the Messiah sent is crucial and needs to be covered by itself. We need to bring in historical and cultural understanding when trying to understand the Jews and their relationship with our Creator. They were drawn to him in a covenant based on obedience. And everything we see in their history, their ups and their downs, has everything to do with their obedience. As we understand them from the times of our Messiah, when we get to the New Testament, we cannot leave out the history of what was going on at that time and the challenges that they were up against with Hellenization. And the thing is that you really don't need to know all of that if you just read his word and understand Yah through both the Old and New Testament. But for those who mainly only read the New Testament, there is a big separation in understanding Yah's will for Israel and how they were supposed to be. So if you need more context and understanding, you want to go more into the history. If we understand Yah and we understand Israel, we should never have expected them to assimilate with Greece or Rome. And if they did, we should never expected for Yah to bless that. And understand that what Yah desired for them was obedience to him, so that they could properly serve him. So what we will do is stop at this point in history and go over what we learned in this part of the video. Here are some important parts to know in part 2 of understanding Israel. Number 1, when we understand Yah through how he dealt with Israel, we can learn and better understand how to serve him. Number 2, Yah consistently communicated the same message of obedience to Israel. You shall walk after Yahuah your Elohim and fear him, and keep his commandments and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. Number 3, all the Jews who followed after and understood Messiah understood the fundamental message of obeying Yah. Like Yahusha said in John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments. Number 4, we cannot just live in lawlessness. He said those who live like that will be rejected because they did not know him. That's found in Matthew chapter 7, verse 23. Number 5, as we come to serve him, we must know what he loves and what he hates, what he really responds negatively to, and what brings him delight, honor, and praise. And we will only know this through reading his word. Number 6, Deuteronomy chapter 28 should be a fundamental part of understanding when learning and knowing about Israel, because it speaks to so many things, not only about Israel and its identity, but also about Yah and how he dealt with obedience and disobedience. Number 7, the people of the other nations were called Gentiles or strangers during that time. It's important that you grasp the importance of that designation of stranger in reference to the people of the other nations. Understand they are strangers because they did not know Yah. But if they clinged to Israel and served Israel, they would then be grafted into Yah through Israel, no longer a stranger. Number 8, the foreigner or stranger was not able to dwell in Israel and serve Yah any way they chose. Through the example of Israel, they were taught how to serve Yah. Number 9, after Solomon, Israel was divided and the northern 10 tribes declared their own king, and Judah and Benjamin declared their own king, and the two kingdoms were separate. Israel was divided. There was the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. The northern tribes went straight into wickedness, and they were conquered first by the Assyrians. They never returned as a whole back to their land. Judah was later carried off by Babylon. They eventually did come back to the land, and they rebuilt the temple. Number 10, they were prophesied of a redeemer from the line of King David, and many of them expected him to be like King David and unite the kingdom and bring back peace in their land, removing the hand of the Romans that were now in control of the land of Judea. Number 11, Alexander the Great took control of Judah in the 4th century BC. Number 12, Greece Hellenized the wealthy in Judah, bringing much Greek culture to the Hebrews. This was mostly the educated scribes and Pharisees especially. Number 13, the leaders of Greece dealt harshly with Judah, consecrating their temple. Number 14, the Maccabees fought back and reclaimed control over Judah and their temple. Number 15, this Maccabean rule ended in 63 BC when Rome took control of Judah. Number 16, Judah and Jerusalem were much different than they were during the times before they were conquered by Babylon. Number 17, the people of Yah believed that their way and culture was the absolute way because they were in communion with the one true God, not the pagan gods that their forefathers were rejected and chastised for following. For those that wished to stay under Yah, they held to their culture. Number 18, Yah did not continuously focus on obedience of his commands to Israel and severely chastise them when they were disobedient, to later send a Savior to the world and just tell them to believe and not require obedience to his commands. You are speaking of two different gods if this is how you look at him. We show we love him by honoring his commands. And this was some of the main takeaways from this video. By this point, you should have an understanding of the importance of obedience and following Yah's ways and commands. You should understand just how much he required it. We cannot speak of him and then ignore that this was important to him and what he required of Israel. But you would only understand this if you understood Yah. As the Jews came back to the land, they did not reject their culture and their ways. They held on to it. They fought for it. So as you apply a level of thinking to the New Testament, because what is told to us is that it was written in Greek, that piece of information right there should not totally make you forget the complete way that Israel lived up until that point. And now you just want to apply the Hellenized way of the Greeks in understanding the God of the Hebrews. You should never do that. Whenever you do this, you have formed a strong misunderstanding of Yah, and that will lead you astray and away from him. But don't worry about it. He desires you to come back to him, which is why series like this are being made, which is why people all over the world are bringing back the importance of following him. And today, as we live out our lives as people of Yah, let us attach to him through a spirit of humility and obedience, and serve him with all our hearts and our souls. You can see where this world is going, and so rather than focus on all the noise, we will focus on growing in our faith and obedience to the Most High. Continue to draw near to him, and he will draw nearer to you. Believe on him through his son Yahusha, and follow him. Now is the time to be forgiven and redeemed. Repent and be obedient to him. He has called you to do so. Will you answer? I hope you do. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share it with others. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Elohim willing, I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I would like to give a special thank you to those who have donated to this ministry. Your contribution is a huge blessing to this ministry. Please continue to pray for me and this ministry. Thank you for your obedience to Yah's call on your heart. I'm humbled by your support, and I'm very thankful for you. Be blessed. Okay. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. I love you all.